I rise to request unanimous consent here on the bills that were just mentioned to call up and pass this year's Police Week bills. These are bipartisan bills. These are common sense. And most importantly, particularly in light of recent events, and you can turn on the television right now and see what I'm talking about, they would give this chamber the chance to demonstrate its commitment to the men and women who wear the badge and to the laws they serve to protect. This is not a time to mince words or blur lines. This is a time to speak clearly with full moral force. In cities across the country, our law enforcement officers are beset from below and above. From below on our streets, they face an emboldened criminal element and a resurgence of organized political violence. From above, in the halls of power, they face a political class which seems hell-bent on undermining and attacking them at every turn. We have watched this unfold for years now. The press has smeared and defamed our police officers, seeking to incite hatred and violence against them. Fringe academic ideas about defunding police and shuttering prisons have moved from the classroom to the courtroom to the legislature and then to codified laws. Riots, lawsuits, slashed budgets, malicious lies blared through the largest megaphones in our country. Time and time again, the system has sided with the criminal over the cop, the looter over the law. The result of this system could be seen in unprecedented waves of violence that ravaged our cities in the wake of the George Floyd riots in 2020. It can still be seen today on the streets of cities overtaken by Antifa. These are not rhetorical or theoretical concerns. We watched it happen in real time. It is not the product of social conditions or inequity or systematic this or that. It is the inevitable result of a civilization that's lost its moral nerve. A civilization that is too racked by guilt to punish its criminals, to enforce its laws, or to confront its enemies, even when those enemies are beating police officers and firebombing federal buildings right before our eyes. When a government loses the ability or the will to defend its own cities, its own institutions, its own people, then it ceases to be a government worthy of its name. The path back to justice is simple. It requires laws like the ones we are going to consider here today. It requires protecting the people who protect us, like the bill to equip first responders with protective gear against fentanyl exposure, keeping them safe from the very poisons they're trying to fight. It requires ensuring that our police officers are healthy in body and in spirit, like the bill to reauthorize critical mental health services for cops and their families. Every single year, more police officers die by suicide than die in the line of duty. This is profoundly a policy failure and one that is on us to fix. It requires hunting down the predators who seek to prey upon our kids from the darkest recesses of the internet, like the bill to reauthorize and modernize the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. This bill funds and enhances our ability to catch and convict the very worst kinds of criminals, those who target and abuse children. It requires building strong police departments with officers who know the neighborhoods and the people that they protect, like our bill to send local recruits to police academies if they agree to serve in the precincts in their own communities. And it requires wisdom and experience, like the bill to give state and local agencies the ability to rehire retired officers in civilian law enforcement roles. If you stand on the side of justice and our first responders, these votes should be simple and easy. That, Mr. President, I'd ask we move forward.
Is there objection to the unanimous consent request?
Is there objection to the unanimous consent request?
I'm going to reserve the right to object.
Senator from New Jersey.
I'm really grateful that this is one of the areas where we have a lot of bipartisan support, because this body, I would say unanimously, believes that we have to do more to help local law enforcement. I see it in my state. We have real challenges with recruitment, challenges with officers who are in incredibly stressful situations for their mental health, and even empowering officers to be able to do their job, which is a job that everyone wants our officers to do. I say this all the time. If you polled my city, which is majority minority city, majority African American city, and asked them, hey, do you want more police, less police, or the same amount of police? Undeniably, they would want more law enforcement. And when I talk to the law enforcement officers in not just my city, but up and down the state, they want more resources. It's why I have multiple bills to actually fund our police departments around our country, specifically in New Jersey, to empower them on everything from closing out murder investigations all the way to mental health. In fact, the legislation that's being brought forward, it's right, it's a bipartisan legislation. I am the co-sponsor of some of the bills that we have right now on the floor. We should be united in this body, all 100 of us, to stand up for public safety and to fund our police, get them the resources and the equipment that they need to do their job. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening. President Trump, through an arbitrary executive order, has told this body that your intentions will not be followed. The legislation that is being proposed today, the president has already said, those DOJ grants will not go to certain states: Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey, that they are not eligible for these grant programs. That's not a bipartisan way of going about it. That's singling out certain states over other states. That's actually defunding the police departments in certain states for other states when you say these states that have gotten many of these grants in years past can no longer get them. None of us in this body should support that. All of us in this body should join together and say, when Congress passes a grant program, the President of the United States cannot arbitrarily decide which states receive those grants and which states don't. I feel a driving sense of urgency that we must support our police officers. They are facing greater and newer challenges in this country. I feel a deep urgency to support mental health issues in particular, because I lost one of my dear childhood friends who died by suicide in uniform. I want to make a simple adjustment to this legislation. Very simple, and what it would do is basically say that when this body has approved these grant programs, the president can't undermine the founder's intention that we hold the purse strings, that the president can't undermine that, and these grants have to go out as Congress intended them. That's all I'm asking from my colleague across the aisle. It's all I'm asking from this body, is that we together say we need to get resources for police officers in all of our country. We shouldn't be picking out some departments and not others. This is just simply making sure that this is a bipartisan effort to fund local police officers. And so I ask my colleagues to pass these bills as I amend them so that we can refocus on the urgent work of reopening the government and then providing all law enforcement agencies with the resources they need, ensuring every law enforcement agency has a fair opportunity to secure funding to support their work, to support the men and women, to support their sacred and noble duties. We should work in a bipartisan way. And so I ask that the consent be modified such that my amendments to S-180, S-419, S-539, S-1316, and S-1563, which are at the desk, also be agreed to with all the other provisions that my colleague is asking for remain intact so that we can fund all of police and stop our president's attempt to defund police departments in blue states.
Is there objection to the modification?
Mr. President,
Senator from Missouri.
reserving the right to object. Mr. President, let's be clear about what this provision does for my friend from New Jersey. It's an attempt to throw a lifeline to these sanctuary cities that are openly defying the law. In order to receive federal grant dollars, you can't withhold information from federal law enforcement. That's what they're doing. That's what it means to be a sanctuary city. What you're saying is we're not going to work with ICE or any other federal agency because we want to protect illegal immigrants in our cities. That's what's happening. That's deeply unpopular with the American people. And that's why the president has taken his action to try to get these cities to come along and be part of the program with the rest of the country to say, we're all going to work together to keep our communities safe. This provision is a direct attempt to undermine the Trump administration to do that and their renewed enforcement of our immigration laws. I know some people got used to the last 4 years where 20 million people came here illegally and federal law enforcement was handcuffed by the Biden administration to actually enforce our immigration laws. So much so that the rhetoric that had been exhibited for that time now is carried over. And you see fire bombings, you see attacks on ICE officials, attempts to dox them, to destroy their families and their reputations, their finances, because they've been led to believe by many with the loudest microphones that somehow everyone's entitled to be here for as long as they want, that our laws don't matter, that borders are arbitrary lines on a map and we're all global citizens. And the white papers from the 60s and the 70s found their way into the halls of the highest offices in government. In the Biden administration, these Ivy League grads who wrote these white papers or read these white papers or indoctrinated by these white papers were suddenly in charge. Well, there's a new sheriff in town who actually believes in law and order. And so I would hope that city leaders who defy our federal laws shouldn't be entitled to federal tax dollars. Federal grant dollars are not entitlements. They're not unconditional welfare for the far-left activists. If you want federal funds, you have to comply with federal law. Sanctuary cities are in open defiance of federal law. They actively prohibit their officials from cooperating with federal immigration officers. They release violent offenders, suppress gang databases, and do everything in their power to prevent the men and women of law enforcement from enforcing our laws. That's what they're doing in sanctuary cities right now. Every one of the Police Week bills that I've offered for unanimous consent, and my friend from New Jersey is indeed a co-sponsor of, are very, very bipartisan. I can't actually believe we're in a place that we're going to be holding up that kind of bipartisan legislation when you see the violence against law enforcement officers in our country every single day. This is a lifeline to them, the help that they need, not just to do their jobs, but to be able to seek the services so they can be healthy physically and mentally. So let's be clear about what's happening. And my friend has, a few moments here to reconsider this. These are common sense. And if anything from last November we could take away, is that the American people voted for a return to common sense. And with that, Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Is there objection to the original request? Senator from New Jersey.
yeah, I have so much respect for my colleague. I want to respond to some of the things he said because, again, I just want to affirm that he is right on the urgency to help our police officers. He is right that states should abide by federal law that passes from this body. But what we have now is a president in his first term that didn't ever try something like this, which is undermining the will of Congress. This is really unprecedented. That has never happened. Republican president, Democratic president, including Donald Trump's first term, where he suddenly said, I'm going to turn off the spigot of support to local law enforcement agencies because I don't agree with your policies. I think that's a threat to the independence of our branch of government. I think that that is, in so many ways, violative of our shared values on both sides of the aisle. But let me go further than that. What the president is doing is saying, not only am I going to stop funding from going to the state of New Jersey, I'm going to go to red counties in New Jersey, red counties in California. I actually went out and talked to people, Republican legislators in states, Republican police officers, Republican, union leader told me this as well, and he says, this is ridiculous. So this is insane. That we would hold grants back from the entire state. He goes, I don't agree with Democrats' policies, but we're out here putting our lives on the line, and Republicans in Congress want to stop resources coming to our police departments? One of the union leaders says to me that my guys are out there sacrificing their lives, and we can't get help that both sides of the aisle agree on? And so, yeah, my colleague and I disagree on domestic immigration policies. But one thing I don't agree on, because I was a mayor of a city that basically said, in order to keep my city safe, we're going to cooperate with the police department, because it was an overbroad generalization that was made on the Senate floor that we're not supporting ICE and immigration activities, because I know this up and down the state of New Jersey, not only do we support them, but we detail officers with federal immigration enforcement. I did it when I was mayor. You want to talk about cooperation, anybody who knows local government, from the FBI to the ATF to ICE, all over New Jersey, we are cooperating with federal authorities. What we have simply said, if we're responsible for local law enforcement, we're not going to do things that create such fear in our communities that immigrant communities are afraid to come to local police to report crimes. And that somehow, not in the first term, Trump's first term, but somehow in this term of office, that's a bridge too far. Well, let me tell you right now, the way that immigration is being pursued in our neighborhoods, where masked agents are coming out of unmarked cars, are going to court appearances and schools and hospitals, my local police officers are telling me how much more dangerous this administration is making communities, because people who are victims of crime now are afraid to go to local police officers and report those crimes. And again, this is not coming from politicians in New Jersey. This is coming from law enforcement officers that have said that we've created such a climate of fear in our country that just solving crimes is getting harder and harder because people are afraid to come to the police. So yes, we have policies that say there are certain things we won't do to maintain a community of trust within our communities. So I understand there is a lot of rhetoric. I can turn on shock news and all of that, but when you talk to the law enforcement officers in many of the most Republican parts of my community, they're outraged about what's happening right now. So again, we can debate policy on immigration, but to me, for a senator to allow a president to undermine the power of the purse relegated by the Constitution to this body is outrageous. It's never been done before. Not in Trump's first term, not by Bush, not by Reagan, not by Clinton, not by Obama. We are in new territory here in our country where we see a president encroaching upon our powers, and I can't be complicit in that. Everybody in this body, I would never question any of my colleagues on either side of the aisle. We all want our local police departments to not only be able to do their job, we all actually want to have more equipment and more resources. That's why these bills are bipartisan. But how could we allow bipartisan bills passed out of the Senate to then be stopped in a partisan way by a president who is then going to choose red states and hurt blue states, even though my state has millions of Republicans who deserve to have their communities safe as well? I'm standing today just to say, let's use common sense and help our police officers together get this resources desperately needed out to our communities now, and not let this fall victim to something that wasn't even an issue in Donald Trump's first term. And so I object. I object.
Objection is heard.